Well, I've been reading through the minor prophets. I'm not sure, except I just feel like, the minor prophets are not minor in the sense that they have a small message. They're minor just because they're shorter than Isaiah and Jeremiah and some of the longer major prophets. But the minor prophets are addressing their culture. Maybe that's why I'm reading them. And I'm reading through the book of Amos. In fact, I just finished it. And in Amos chapter 4, God says through Amos, He said, I sent you famine, and you didn't respond. So I sent you drought, and you didn't respond. I sent you blight and locusts. Your young men were killed. Your horses were taken, yet you did not return. And isn't that true of us? We don't stop at the fences. Pain doesn't usually cause us, at least at first, to wake up and pay attention. And even God's law, even His direct punishment, even when it came in light of prophecy, didn't awaken the nation, so they went into captivity for 70 years. And then they came back and they learned grace. They learned that God kept His promises. Well, that's a macro view of what we're doing here in this series. As I talked with Vince Miller, and we were talking about how do we keep men from going up to the brink and over the brink? How do we help men to deal with things before there's a crisis? How do we help men develop habits and patterns that sow into their life instead of steal from their life before they hit the wall? And so I came up with all kinds of things, and basically they were all fences. They were all practices, and they're good things, and they're good things to practice, but we know that nothing ever permanently changes unless there's a change in the heart. And so that's why we're calling this pure cardio. And this is your heart. Here's your heart. You're not a lion. You're not a wolf. You're not a snake. You're a puppy. Well, you're lizards too, but this is a different analogy. Come on, work with me here. You're a lizard with a puppy heart. You're like a golden retriever puppy that wants to belong. You want to follow. You're curious. Your heart is beautiful. It's to be trained. It's ready. It's ready to grow. And here's what we know about the heart. The heart was made to follow, not to lead. Do not follow your heart. Be counterculture. Train your heart. Educate your heart. Submit your heart, because your heart was made to follow. Secondly, when you give your heart, you become vulnerable. When you give your heart away to a woman, you become vulnerable to her. In a good way, because you want to be. You want to be under her influence. When you give your heart away to sin, you become a slave to sin. When you give your heart to anything that is idolatrous, you become vulnerable to the power of that idol. But when you give yourself to the Lord, to a master whom you can trust, you become vulnerable to His counsel and to His guidance in His way. So the heart was made to follow, not to lead. And the heart, giving your heart makes you vulnerable. That's what we know about the heart. And so we've talked about the vulnerable heart. Tony did a great job talking about the teachable heart. Last week we talked about the humble heart. So today we want to talk about another aspect of the heart. So what did the Apostle John and John Lennon agree about? What does the Apostle Paul and Paul McCartney agree about? What does the Apostle James and James Taylor agree about? Yeah, somebody looked ahead. They agree about love, right? That love is the highest thing we could achieve. We write songs about it, we talk about it, we long for it. So today we want to look behind the breastplate, and we want to look at the loving heart. There are 3,500 songs with love in the title. By contrast, there's only 124 songs with work in the title. And there's no songs with computer in the title. We got songs about railroads and about horses and everything else, but nothing about the computer. And, some of the songs are these. All you need is? There, you got it. I just called to say I? Crazy, stupid, love. Crazy in love. I can't stop loving you. The best of my love. We talk about love all the time because love is the summit. Love is the summit. When I was in college, I spent 2 summers taking young men on 14-day expeditions into the high Sierras in California. These were tough men, tough young men. They were from the barrios of East LA, from Bakersfield. They actually were delinquents. They'd been remanded to the camps in California. And we were taking them on these expeditions in an attempt to show them some independence on their own, to get them away from drugs, and also to show them what it's like to be a man and how to trust other people. And we'd hike in about 3 days. We'd set up a base camp, and then we would try to climb 2 or 3 peaks. It wasn't technical climbing, but it was hard climbing. It was 12,000 feet or so. And I'll never forget, as we did that, we would get up real early in the morning that we wanted to summit, and we'd hike to the top so that we could get there early in the day and get down off the mountain before the lightning and the thunderstorm started. But I remember it took hours to get there, usually 3 or 4 hours to get to the peak. And then as soon as we got to the peak, you could see these kids just worshiping. They didn't know that's what they were doing, but they were just gawking. You know, they were looking around. They were just, have you been to the summit? And you can see 100 miles. And these kids fell silent, and they were just pointing. Look at that. They had never seen anything like this. It just stunned them in the beauty and the majesty and the amazement of being at the summit. That's what we love about the summit, is you can see farther than you've ever seen before. And at the summit also, you remember that we didn't fall into this. This took a process to get here. We walked up a trail to get here, but it was worth it. And if you've been to the summit, you want to go back to the summit. You want to get up there, you want to see that vision, because you can see the future, and you want to go there again and again and again. I want to refer to an author that I've come across who's written a book. And you can get it today, and this is just one of the chapters in this book, and count them, there's 9 other chapters you get with the book if you buy the book. Yeah. Discovering what love really is not just a good idea. Love is what God is. Love is the ultimate measure of my contribution in life. The final evaluator of my life is, did I love and did I give love? During my journey on this earth, did I give the most essential thing? Did I generously pass on what I received from the Father? Did anyone's life receive the one investment from me that will last forever? Did I spend enough time at the summit, luxuriating in the warmth and wonder of God's love? The greatest of all the things in life is love. I want to examine my heart and your heart this morning about a loving heart. If I have a loving heart, there's something going on in the well of my life that will spill out onto others. We said this phrase a couple of weeks ago, whatever fills, spills. So do I have a loving heart? Love is a universally held assumption in desperate need of a clear definition. And that is so true, because it's a shape-shifting word. We use it for almost anything we want. We use it to sell things. You know, love is what makes a Subaru. A Subaru. Are you kidding me? People can say that with a straight face, and they go buy a Subaru. We use this to justify any kind of lifestyle. Well, if you love this or you love that person, that's the only measurement of whether it's right or wrong. Love leverages causes like feeding the hungry and helping the homeless, and that's a good thing. We use love to sell things. We use love as an excuse for stupidity. Well, I was ambushed by love. Okay, fool. Where's that taking you? We use love to dismiss the other attributes of God. Well, I know that God is only love. Well, He's also just, but we use love to cover over everything. We use love as the sole criteria for our parenting. instead of some discipline as well. So the experience of the summit is being loved. We all long for that. Here's what it says in 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. Love has to come from somewhere, and we all need to learn what love is. We learn it best from the Father. We may not have learned it in other places, but we learn it from our true Father in heaven. But the journey to the summit is loving others. And here's what it says in John 15. Greater love has no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. So I want to give you two healthy cardio exercises today. You can remember these today. You can write them on the palm of your hand, or you can remember them in your mind and use these as exercises for a healthy heart, for a pure cardio. Because when you train the heart, everything else is strengthened, and in this particular case, it's really true. So 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7, and this passage was not written for weddings. This was written to a fussing, fighting, divided, jealous, immoral church. And Paul is saying, here's the highest, here's the peak, here's the summit in all the discipline I'm writing to you in the first 12 chapters of 1 Corinthians. Here's the summit that I want you to long for. Here's what it says. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. You may kiss your bride. It wasn't written for a wedding, it was written for a very practical life. So now I'm not going to start a new denomination over this, and when you get to heaven, God isn't going to say, did you memorize Roger's outline for 1 Corinthians 13? But I believe the outline can be found in the first phrase. It says, love is patient and love is kind. And I believe that shows us the two sides of love, the two sides of the coin of love. Love is patient and love is kind. So here's the outline that I want you to remember today. Can you remember this? Love says no, and love says yes. Can you remember that? If you want to have a healthy cardio, if you want to have a pure heart and you want to be loving, say no and say yes. So let me walk you through that, because I think this is extremely helpful. It's been helpful to me to just look at it in this way, that love is patient. Practice saying no, because love is patient. A loving heart restrains itself from its first automatic reaction. Now, can you think of all kinds of examples in your own life where that is true? If I want to love that child, I had better not react to the spilled milk, or the speeding ticket, or the drugs I found in their drawer. If I'm going to react every time, if I'm going to just automatically, habitually, in a practiced way, from my own background, just react to things, then love is not going to be shown. I need to say no to my first automatic reaction. And it's more sophisticated than just counting to 10. Love says no to a host. Well, let me quote myself here. Love says no to a host of impatient, reflexive emotions, bad habits, self-serving actions, and devious motives. Now that's a lot. But if love is patient, it's taking the long view of things. Love is saying, I want not only to achieve the summit, I not only want to spend time there, I want to bring other people to that summit. And when I was doing this backpacking ministry for 2 summers and spent 100 nights under the stars, That was the glory of it. But getting there was making breakfast for these guys and teaching them how to roll up a sleeping bag and taking care of their feet because they had blisters and taking care of the whining. And if I really wanted to get them to the summit, there was a lot of work involved. There was a lot of patience involved. And saying no to my desire, which was, well, you guys just can take care of yourselves. I'm going to go up there by myself. So love says no. And it lists a bunch of things in 1 Corinthians 13. So let's make this an exercise. Love says no to envy because love is patient. So you just say that to me every time I say that, because love is patient. Love says no to envy because? Love says no to boasting because? Love says no to rudeness because? Love says no to demandingness because? Love says no to anger because? Love says no to resentment because? Love says no to rejoicing at wrong because? See, patience is not just a momentary pause before the club comes out. It infiltrates all those reactions inside of me. I never knew how selfish I was until I got married. Is that true for you? But then it was turbocharged when we had children. Well, we had one at a time. And that's the problem, right? When we had children, and when I was in college, I developed a habit. I was always so physically exhausted from running. And my roommate and I, in fact, a couple of us guys in the same suite, we were on a different schedule than everybody else. We'd go to bed about 10 o'clock because we got up at 6 and to run 5 miles before breakfast, you know. And but the other guys in our suite they weren't on that schedule. They were up till midnight, 1 o'clock, and making all kinds of noise. And I got in the habit of, I didn't express this, but I got in the habit of raging in my heart against these idiots who were disturbing my sleep. In fact, my roommate just about committed mayhem several times with them. And so I would let him do that. But I was the raging person inside myself. So I had this thing about, I'm very selfish about my sleep. You know, I can be generous with money, but don't ask me for an hour of my sleep. Well, what happens when you have a baby? Yeah, that's the wife's job, right? So you have this baby, and now you're being awakened 3 or 4 times a night. And what happens is that the old triggers kick in. And I love this child. I love my little daughter, Jill. I really love her. But my automatic reflex is I'm angry because she's awakened me. Love is patient. The exercise of my heart needs to say no to the way I have trained myself to react to something that I can't any longer control. Love says no. Look at this list. Love says no to envy, boasting, rudeness, demandingness, resentment, anger, rejoicing at wrong. That to me is a very helpful thing to think about. My love needs to be patient. Not meek and mild and never standing up for itself, but patient to not react. When our brother Ron Wright was hiking the Appalachian Trail a couple of years ago, his dream was to hike from Georgia to Maine, 2,000 miles, but he thought, no, I'm going to take it in chunks. So you started when? In April, Ron? And so Ron learned a lot in the first few days about rain and mud and mosquitoes and bears and surly other backpackers and people taking the shelter and all that kind of stuff. And so he slogged through the first 4 or 5 days, and he came to a hostel where there was a guy that actually did a ministry. I don't know if he called it a ministry, but it was a service to hikers where he went through their backpacks and he showed them the stupid things that they packed in their backpacks. Sorry, Ron. Where he showed them all the extra weight they're carrying that they didn't need. And so Ron received some counsel for about 15 pounds of extraneous stuff that he sent back home by UPS. This is a picture of love. There's a lot of extraneous stuff that we carry that we need to unload and say no to so that we can love. Now, you might be thinking about your wife. You might be thinking about a child. You might be thinking about a grown son or grown daughter or a grandson. Maybe it's a work partner, somebody in your workplace, somebody that you need to love. Well, the very first exercise is to say no to what is automatic. The scripture calls that, by the way, the flesh, the programming. When we are born again in Christ, we receive a new nature, and yes, it's new, and everything about us wants to do this, but the old software is still running. So love says no to all these things. So here's some cardio habits that we can practice. Am I listening better and longer? I had a friend who was in a small group with me, and he said he was not a talker, and he was tired when he came home. He was an engineer, and his wife would always say, "Well, how was your day?" And he'd say, "Fine," you know. And then she would launch on her day because she's a verbal processor. And he said, he said, "We've got a lot of tension in our marriage right now because I just can't stand it. I just want to get alone." And he said, "I've projected that to her, and that's not going well for me. It's very tense in our home right now." And so we said, "Hey, brother, why don't you try to listen for 5 minutes? And then quietly excuse yourself to go sit in your chair, read your paper, watch the news, whatever." He came back the next month in our group. He said, "I tried it and it worked. She believed me." That I loved by listening for 5 minutes. And it made a huge difference. And it might not be 5 minutes, it might be a half an hour, it might be 30 seconds. To show someone that you're there, you're present, you've turned your face toward them, and you've looked at them, and you've repeated to them what they've said to you. Most of you have had little children, and they know intuitively whether you're paying attention or not. Because when they're 2 or 3 years old, what will they do? They will turn your face toward them. Or they'll get in your face and look at you with those big liquid eyes. They want presence. So how do I love? Am I listening better? Secondly, am I considering where this person is coming from? Think about somebody in your office who looks disheveled and grumpy and surly and acts that way. And maybe you don't know the answer to this, but just ask yourself the question, I wonder what kind of home life they have. I wonder if anybody has touched them. Not that you should, but has anybody touched them physically for years? Has anybody told them that they're loved? Has anybody made a meal for them? What kind of home life do they have? Consider where this person is coming from. That should evoke a willingness to say no to your first response and say yes to love. Thirdly, am I choosing to understand? My dad had a phrase when I was growing up that he borrowed from Soren Kierkegaard, and we learned how to pronounce that correctly. It's not Kierkegaard, it's Kierkegaard. And the phrase was, "Love chooses to understand." I grew to hate that phrase because he used it all the time. Especially when I was mad at my sisters. He'd say, "Well, Roger, love chooses to understand." Well, they wouldn't understand in this case, you know. Love chooses to understand. Hear that? It's a choice. I want to choose to understand you. Fourth, am I aware of my deeper motive? Boy, that goes right to the heart. Because often my deeper motive is just to get this done with. Get on to the next thing. Or make you think I was listening and caring, but I really wasn't. What's my deeper motive here? I need to examine my heart. And finally, am I responding to a deficit motivation in my own heart? In other words, am I operating today out of guiltiness or frustration or fear or anger That's a deficit motivation. I call it a deficit motivation because it gets you going, but it's stealing energy from you. It's like drinking salt water. Love is the greatest motivation we can ever have, but these others steal from us. So those are some cardio habits that we can check ourselves with and say, am I saying no? Am I saying no? Am I being patient? So the second practice is this. Do you know what it is? First one is no, and the next one is what?
Yes.
Yes, right. Because love is kind. You can't be kind by accident. Kindness is an outflow. Kindness is an investment. Kindness is proactive. Love is patient. It says no to a host of snarly motivations inside of me. But love says yes at the same time. It says, I want this. I want that. I want to go in this direction because love is kind. A loving heart is proactive about the best things in life. And there's no falling in love. We're not captured by love. We're not destined to love. We're not punished by love. We choose to love. So I say yes to love. So here's a phrase. To love is to do what you want. It comes right out of this book. So it's got to be true. Right? To love is to do what you want. That last word is all important. What do I really want from life? Who do I want to become? What do I want others to remember about me? Wanting is not to be confused with wishing or feeling. Wanting is the practiced, regular installment toward a desired outcome. And be careful here, wanting is not the same as feeling. In fact, my wants should frequently trump, sorry for that word, how I feel. Read the sentence again so you don't lose it here. In fact, my wants should frequently trump how I feel. This is not just semantics. To love is to do what you want. Do you want to have a loving brotherhood in a small group? Then you may not always feel like getting up at 5:30 on Friday morning. But if you want brotherhood, you come here, or you go to a Tuesday night group. Do you want to have a growing, nurturing marriage? Well, you might not always feel like responding to those fussy little habits that your wife has, you know. But you enter into it. Do you want to run a marathon? Well, you don't always feel like doing the training. Do you want to play the guitar? Well, you don't always feel like practicing. You get the difference? See, wanting has a willpower behind it. Wanting has volition. Volition is the willfulness of the soul to accomplish something that we desperately want to do. So, Paul extols love as proactive. It is kind. Love says yes to the hard work of consistently giving itself away because it wants the best outcome and the highest reward. Real love progresses from the internal purifying of motives toward the unstoppable investment in others. This is love's direction. This is love's work. This is what love wants. In biblical terms, it always rejoices with the truth, protects, trusts, hopes, and perseveres. So, we need to say yes to rejoicing with the truth because love is what? Kind. We want to rejoice with the truth because we want to be resilient because we want to trust because we want to hope because we want to persevere because we want to make eternal investments because love never fails. The one standard of operation in God's kingdom is, did you love? heard a story from a young woman who came to my office one time about her husband. Her husband was a youth pastor, not in our church, but I knew about him. And she said, I was flying in from somewhere and my husband couldn't pick me up, so he told me, he texted ahead of time and told me where he left the car. And I went to the car and I opened the car and immediately I was hit by the scent wafting out of his cologne, the favorite cologne that I love. And there in the car was a rose lying on the dash and a note saying, "I love you, welcome home." I started up the car and he had cued the CD to the song that's our song. And she said he did all that because he couldn't be there himself. And then she burst into tears and she said, "That's just like him." And I thought, what? What? She said, "That's just like him. He's never there. He does all these things. He serves in all these ways, but he misses me. He's not there. There's no there in our marriage. He's always somehow missing in action, but he covers it with all these works that he does." And what does it say in 1 Corinthians later? It says, if you have all the eloquence of the angels, but you don't have love, you don't have anything. And you can even give your body to be burned as a martyr, doing all these acts of service, but if you don't have love, then you don't have anything. So love needs to say yes in a proactive way to investing. Now, when my wife comes home and I'm not able to be there, I want to think about what that guy did. But I also want to give to her my heart and say yes to her. So let's do some cardio habits. First one is, am I drinking enough? Am I staying hydrated? I love Ephesians 5 that says, be imitators of God. That would be easy, right? Now that's not what the main point is. Be imitators of God as God's dearly loved children. And then go act in love. So drink. You cannot give out of an empty well. You've got to start full every day. Are you drinking enough? Secondly, am I eating a healthy diet? What are you feeding your mind? Whatsoever is good, whatsoever is pure, whatsoever is noble, whatsoever is good report. Am I feeding on those things, or is it the news cycle? Is it the cynical gossip? What am I feeding on? Am I feeding on my old pains? Am I talking to anybody about that? Am I trying to lance the boils that have been the pain in my life and the wounds in my life? Am I eating a healthy diet? Thirdly, am I stressed over things I cannot control? Boy, that's a big one. Am I pursuing things that just set me up to be angry and frustrated? Fourth, am I pursuing what I really want? Psalm 37 says, trust the Lord, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And that doesn't mean a 96-inch television screen. What that means is down deep below, behind the breastplate of your armor, there's a heart here that desperately wants to belong, desperately wants to give itself away, desperately wants to explore, desperately wants to be free. And the Lord will give you that if you pursue him. Finally, am I keeping an eternal perspective? What does it say in Matthew 6:33? Seek second or third the kingdom of God? No, seek first. Not only first in priority, but first in time. And he will add all these other things to you. So these are some habits that help us gain a loving heart. It's a huge subject, and you have a lot to learn from each other. So I've got some questions for you to talk about around the table, because you know what may happen is that the way God taught you something may be exactly what the guy across the table needs to hear. So go right up to the brink and even jump in. You don't have to share, but I think men really want a place that's safe where they can say, you know what, here's something that's true about me that you wouldn't learn in the parking lot or in the Commons on Sunday. So let's share together around our tables. Bless you as you do that.